Yes, I've been interested to hear what people are thinking and reflecting. I remember the day I was sitting by a big fire in Nelson looking after a millionaire's house that I'd helped build so the proceeds could go to Bright Hope. And Jerry and Haley turned up. Never met them before. This big guy and this little lady. And they said, oh, we hear you've got some projects. They meant partnerships, but they said projects in South America, and we'd like to go look at them. So we got talking, and I don't know, but I felt like God saying, these people should be going to Africa. Just sort of, hey, sometimes you get a thought. So I said, hey, what about Africa? No, we're not interested in Africa. Haley said, I've always wanted to go to South America. So I can't exactly remember how the conversation went because I can't even remember what I had for breakfast. But it's been something like, well, we'll go away and pray about it. And usually when people say that to me, it means no. But they did. And they came back and they said, yes, we'll go to Africa. Pretty amazing. And God sent them to Africa for 6 years. And they did an amazing job. And so you just never know when you're in this business what's going to go on tomorrow, and that's the exciting part. So although I appreciate what you've all just said, I think without pulling rank it would be over my dead body if we started paying people because it's part of the excitement of this place, that God does amazing stuff every day, including paying for most of us. And we've had hard times and good times, personally, Heather and I. And she spent years with me not being around most of the time, from India and China and whatever. So, it's pretty hard to quantify, but it's a real value. And I know a number of people in this room who've given very significant money to our organisation, and part of the reason is that they see that trust in God and they see the outcomes. And we deal with a lot of ministries that are very, very into process. And Fraser will tell you, and Kevin will tell you, I'm not into process. I love the Nike t-shirt that says, just do it. And so to me, we're not into process, we're into outcomes. And that's why I'd like to start with, what does God want for every one of us here today? Not just Bright Hope, but what does He want? First slide, this one. Didn't put my glasses on. Because these are very important words. Then Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age. So I really appreciate people in this room who see that as the mandate that God has given every person in this room. And so that's our calling as Christians. So why is it so messed up? Why do we get so sidetracked with pastors' salaries and all the things that happen in church that don't relate to that? It's a problem that we face today, because Satan's very, very keen to get us sidetracked off those verses, because they're what we're all about. They're what we should be all about. Not about comfort, not about retirement, not about whether we have 4 or 5 cars, none of that stuff. That's what it's all about. And so our commitment in Bright Hope is to facilitate that for you people. If there's any way that we can excite you about what is happening through partnerships around the world, I believe you can see this happening by your partnership with us. When I was a kid, I was brought up in a pretty conservative Brethren home, and my dad was right into reading books that looked to me to be incredibly boring, by Darby and all the founders of the Brethren movement. And I discovered a man called George. And he was one of the founders of the Brethren movement as well. George was a young boy born 200 years ago. He was a Prussian, and he was a bit of a bad boy, and I'm not sure if that's why I was attracted to him, but he was, at 10 years old, he was a thief, a liar, and a gambler at 10. And at 15, he was drinking and gambling when his mother died. So his father sent him off to a theological college and thought, well, if he learnt theology, he might become a well-paid minister. So George went off to this college, and somebody asked him to a prayer meeting. And he went along, and he went home that night, got on his knees and asked God into his heart. And he went on, and he adopted 10,024 orphans, started 117 schools, and he had over 120,000 orphans in schools. He did 200,000 miles as a missionary. And his name was George Muller. And never once, with all that phenomenal work, did he ask anyone for anything. He just asked God. And as a kid, I thought, he's pretty amazing. And he was pretty radical in this Brethren movement. And they said, you can't come along and take communion unless you've been baptised. And he said, no, that's not right. And so he was arguing with these guys, Anthony Groves and some of these well-known Brethren guys. In fact, he married his sister. And he started building homes in Bristol, totally in faith, asking only God. And he raised about £90 million equivalent today, of £90 million. The really amazing thing to me is the George Muller Charitable Trust now gives to this ministry. The guy that 200 years ago started only asking God, they now don't have any orphans in the UK. And so they're looking for ministries that are doing what they did 200 years ago, and they've linked up with us, and now they're substantial donors to this ministry here today. So pretty exciting that here's a man that never once in his life asked for money. So one of our values is to keep you people informed. We go to our commitment. So our commitment in Bright Hope is to share partnership opportunities in the developing world with you, our donors. We want to excite you with what God is doing. We want to inform you. We want to partner with you in a very sincere way. We want you to think that your money is being well spent. And you've heard today what's happening around the world. That's our commitment. We want to keep doing that for you. Secondly, we want to keep our partners and donors resourced with field updates. And so I think it's now every 2 months we do a newsletter to try and keep you informed as to what God is doing in this ministry. We want to stay relatively small. We want to stick to our 10%. And like I say, I appreciate the discussion we've just had, but I think it's a huge part of this ministry's effectiveness that we're trusting God for our salaries, for our partners, and for the future. So, yeah, it's going to be a really active discussion in the boardroom if that changes.
I try.
And we want to grow slowly. Why is that? Because this ministry from 22 years ago when Heather and I started was built on relationship. Asking God to introduce us to people in countries around the world that needed something that he could provide through us. And so we have friends all over the world, but you don't make friends easily. And so it's built on relationship. And so it won't grow fast, but it's going to keep growing because we're very committed to see those verses applied to the whole of the world, and then the Lord will come back. So our job's not over yet. And we want to build a quality team. And I think, I'm biased, but I think we have a great team, absolutely great team. And that's God's doing. When we were 36, we gave up work to do this ministry. And our secular friends thought we were crazy. But so did most of our Christian friends. But God has blessed that. Okay, our target. I told myself I wouldn't get emotional.
I did too.
Yeah, well done. Okay, I'm doing as well as Fraser, so that's good. So our target is not secular people. We go and talk to them about what we do. When I was on the aeroplane 20 years ago, they'd say, "What do you do?" And you tell them, and they'd say, "Oh, that's great," and keep talking to you. Today they say, "That's great," and then grab their magazine. They don't want to know about it. Big difference in 20 years. They're just not interested in what Jesus has got to say. So we're not looking for those people. We're looking for people who have a heart for what we put up on the overhead for Matthew 28. We're looking for people who are what we call kingdom investors. People who really want to see God at work in the third world. I don't speak too often now, but every time I do, someone comes up to me in this country and says, "What about the poor in New Zealand?" But don't get me on that. Yeah. So anyway, and then we want to deal with churches that are really serious about mission. Now I know there's a few people in church leadership here today, and so I want to be careful what I say. But you know, when I was a kid, we were really concerned about what happened in the third world. And we weren't that concerned sometimes about our community. Now it's the opposite. And God isn't a God of either or, He's a God of both. And so, you know, Acts 1 and 8 says we start here and we go there. And so we need churches that are really excited about the harvest field, about the fact that God says if you sow a seed, you can grow 100 times the harvest in the right place. And we know where the right place is. And you've heard statistics today that are involving hundreds of thousands of people. And so we're looking to partner with churches that are serious about that. That's quite a hard job today. It's a hard job to get more than 5 minutes to talk about it too. But that's another subject. So yeah, our target is kingdom investors, people like you, and churches. Now, I've been given the subject, believe it or not, of that being the challenge. So I look out here and say, well, what am I going to say? These are our partners. What's the challenge here? I don't know. I'm just hoping that today you're inspired. The challenge is finding more people like you. We're looking for people like you to share the news about what we do. We don't make a big song and dance about the fact that we only take 10%. Most people are trying to bury how much they take because they take so much. We're quite happy to say that's the most we take to try and make this ministry effective. And so we're looking for people like you who are serious about investing in the kingdom. If you know some, we'd love to know them. Okay, our strategy. There are several people that I know, quite a number of people that I know, who pray for this ministry every day. They don't necessarily give anything, or they might give a little, but they pray for Bright Hope World and our partners every day. That's a huge part of this ministry. I believe that God says, you do your best and I'll do the rest. And so we're called to do something, we're trying to do it. And God's saying, you do what Matthew 28 says, and I'll bless it. And so we're asking you to go home from today inspired and committed to prayer for our partners around the world. We want to share our information through the website, through churches and interest groups. And if you know people who need or want that information, we'd love to give it to them, because we'd like people to know about what God is doing around the world through the Indigenous Church. We'd like to take key leaders and donors to visit our partners. When Heather and I first started Bright Hope, back in the very early 90s, we had one major donor. And he kept saying to us, we want you to come on a cruise. And we'd say, we're too busy. And he'd say, well, you're just backpacking around the world. And we say, yeah, but we're starting partnerships around the world. So finally we came to an agreement. We'll go on this cruise with you if you'll come and visit one of the partnerships. Because he was the major donor, but he didn't want to go near any of the countries. He said, I'll earn the money, you give it away. It was a pretty good deal. So we went on this cruise around the Indian Ocean, and he came with us to Sri Lanka. And he met these little children that he had given money to hear the gospel. And then he went and saw their homes. And he could not believe it. He said, I wouldn't put my dog in a house like that. This is a very wealthy American guy. And we got on the ship that night, and he said that was the most significant thing. And he went home and he basically gave all his money to Bright Hope. He had a 1936 Packard V12 that was worth $400,000, owned by a film star called Clark Gable. He'd done it up, and he said, here, have my Packard. So it was worth taking him to Sri Lanka to see those kids. So if you haven't been and you think it would be worthwhile, we think it would be worthwhile if you're a donor to come and see what your investment is doing. And over the years, we've taken people, and as a result, huge things have happened. So we like taking people who have got a heart for the kingdom. We don't want to take people who want to do a cheap trip around the world, but we do want to take people who are really interested in what God is doing. So you're very welcome. Grace is always looking for people to come who have got a heart for mission to see what God's doing. Okay, our request. We need your help. You need to tell us if we're doing this right. Contrary to what I said before, we're really interested in what you think about everything. I say that sincerely. Relationship is hugely important to us, and you're very important to us. And so we'd like to hear if you think you can help us do this job more effectively. We'd like to know what you think. And if you think there's something you can do to help our partners, we'd be interested in that. One of the biggest problems that we all have when we go to see our partners is that we get overcome with emotion by their needs. And if we're not careful, we start being Father Christmas. And that's not good. And so when you come, we ask you to respect the fact that we've thought about some of these things. And I have travelled quite a bit with churches. I have travelled quite a bit with business people. And they have a heart for God, and they have a heart for people, but they've sometimes spoiled some of our partnerships. by acting out of emotion instead of thinking through how it affects them. You've heard some of that over the day. And so if you come, and we love you to come, we'd ask you to respect what we know is best for those people. You say, that sounds pretty arrogant. Yeah. But it's all to do with relationship. And you know, you can watch people with their children and they love them to bits and they ruin them because they won't discipline them. And so we need to think the same way with our partners. We need to be loving enough to know what wouldn't help them by being emotionally responsive to some of the things that we do. Now, I hope that doesn't sound wrong, because I can tell you every week, as an executive, we agonise over the needs of the world and how we can appropriately meet those. And often our initial response is the wrong response. But once we pray about it, God gives us a corrective response. And so, part of the challenge of sustainability is to make sure we're affecting God's heart, not our response, not our emotional response. Because if we want perfect answers, God's going to give them to us. If we want human answers, we'll work on our own personal reactions. So, remember George Mueller? He, 200 years ago, did amazing stuff, and he never once told anyone about it. He just told God. Sure, he shared stories, and we love sharing stories with you or with your church or with your home group or whoever. We love to tell stories about what God is doing through our partners. But hopefully you'll never hear us ask you for money, because that isn't our job. Our job is to share what God is doing, and He will put in your hearts what you should do. That's all.